Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Alan Moore presiding. He's not really a judge, but I thought it would be funny. Anywho, this is On Trial. I'm your defense prosecuting attorney for the evening, Mr. Mark Radulich. And on the docket tonight is the 2005 Warner Brothers / DC Comics / Vertigo feature Constantine, or Tyne, depending on your pronunciation, starring Keanu Reeves. Defending this picture this evening is Mr. Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Hey, everybody. I'm Sean. You're not. Welcome to On Trial, and welcome to a movie that for once was not quite as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Well, already this is going to be a fun debate.
Oh, Mark, did you suffer through this one?
You know, this was one of those in a slew of like Keanu Reeves films that I just actively avoided. And then this past year or so, I've become very interested in the character because of his appearances on Legends of Tomorrow and before that Arrow. So, you know, we watched the show, we did a TV party on it, we did the comic book that this is partially based on, Dangerous Habits. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I'm going to watch the movie with an open mind. And, you know, should have trusted my instincts.
I don't know. It's one of those movies that I think that it would have had potential, except for the association it was kind of branded with. Or it was saddled with, I think is the word. Yeah. It was kind of saddled with an unfortunate association for what would have otherwise maybe not been in an alternate universe, an okay standalone movie.
You know, maybe. I think, though, since the century has turned, and TV and movie habits have changed to, you know, long tails of niche viewing. Except for the super event film, or the super, or even the super event television show. You know, your Game of Thrones, the water cooler thing that takes on sort of a life of its own.
Mm-hmm.
I think Constantine may have been 10 years too late. I think this finds an audience in the 90s where things were more dour and depressed and technology hadn't given you the opportunity to watch a new feature film from the comfort of your couch.
I don't know that I agree entirely with that.
Okay.
Because let's see here. This came out in, reminding myself of the year one more time, 2005. Okay. I would actually beg to differ that I think it came out 10 years too early.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your argument?
I do. Well, for starters, we're coming into an era of comic book movies when there are a lot of lesser-known characters, for one thing, that are starting to really get their due. And I would even venture not necessarily just in comic movies, to be perfectly honest. Let's take a look at television. Supergirl has never been a major marquee DC character, and yet she's got a hit show on the CW. Same could be said for Black Lightning, now going into its, fourth season?
So, I have some counters there, but I don't want to keep interrupting you, so round back to this.
Yes, and these are just a couple of examples. Mm-hmm. And on Legends of Tomorrow, they've managed to work in a number of lesser DC characters into a series where they've kind of been handled in just the right way. that they've been relatively interesting. And at the same time, you could also say the same for the film universe. Marvel maybe a little bit more so than DC, but then again, Suicide Squad has also never been an A-list title, and that got a big summer blockbuster. Shazam hasn't set the world on fire as a solo hero, not on the level of, say, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Flash, etc. Got a monumentally successful movie. And you've also got the fact that thanks to the DC animated universe, and I would also even throw the two Injustice video games into the mix, they've been able to expose a lot more people to the heroes and villains that weren't necessarily, slathered on underoos when we were growing up, or didn't get best-selling timely Christmas released action figures. But also it's a time when other comic imprints other than just DC and Marvel are kind of getting the love they deserve. And I know that Vertigo is a DC imprint. I understand that. But it's also kind of a different universe as well. And I'd also throw in that it's a time when superheroes are now, how can I put this? I think we're in more of an era where once again the anti-hero is decidedly popular, especially flawed heroes that a lot of readers / viewers / gamers / whatever fans nowadays can really relate to. And I think that's also why, and I'm sure there are people who would argue this, you could also kind of set things up now so that as opposed to the previous two attempted incarnations, you could finally kind of be open about the fact that Constantine also for a while was one of the few very openly queer heroes on any major comic label. So you would have a chance to break a little bit of ground there with a mainstream movie. I just think it would have maybe done a little bit better nowadays than it would have then. And also in 2005, last point, and then I'll kind of let you counter with whatever you want to. In 2005, we didn't yet have the glut for a while of major comic book movies that we have now. Up to that point, this was just kind of when that big resurgence led by the first two Spider-Man movies and the first two X-Men movies was really kind of finding its stride. So, comic book movies were not hugely in vogue yet, in my opinion, except for those two major franchises. You put that out now, and I think you would have a combination of enthused comic fans who would be going, oh, finally, they're kind of getting outside the box, and they're continuing this trend and bringing this really edgy kind of layered character that I love into the mainstream. This could be fun. Or on the other hand, you could also have people going, ugh, another comic movie, please fucking spare us.
Couple of things. Just on this stuff about the CW. So Supergirl starts out on CBS, and then after one season, and I'm not looking at the ratings right this second, but if it was doing blockbuster numbers, they wouldn't have moved it. But it had to have been doing somewhere in the realm of Midland for them to have moved it to the CW. It has survived because the CW has basically become the DC / Archie network for the most part.
The DC Archie network, I like that.
You've got. I mean, I think they were going to put Sabrina on there too, but then they decided to go with Netflix.
which I think was a good decision.
Yeah. DC and Greg Berlanti and the CW have kind of created like a niche DC on TV universe there. So a lot of stuff is successful by association. You know, Black Lightning has the benefit of being sandwiched somewhere between Arrow and Flash, which are two established, well-received shows. Supergirl has also been drawn into that universe. Legends is kind of like they threw together a hodgepodge of side characters, which now Constantine is a part of. I made this point on Tuesday when we were talking about the Constantine series. If they had waited until the CW verse took off in earnest and they had a few shows and they snuck that series onto there, I think it does better because you've already got the CW TV watching superhero fan audience.
Okay, now I smell what you're cooking there, Rock. But allow me to start the Radulich in broadcasting drinking game off in earnest pretty much immediately. This is like the podcast equivalent to day drinking for us. So I kind of get the insinuation that Supergirl had been such a big hit just on its own merits, CBS wouldn't have shoved it off onto the CW. Okay, to a certain extent, I see your argument. But by the same token, I would also argue this. Is Pac a failure as a professional wrestler because it ultimately didn't pan out for him in WWE? How about Kenta? Colt Cabana? Juice Robinson? All people who were indeed talented, who had plenty of merit on their own. It's just that they found themselves walking into that landscape, and I believe, depending on which of those examples we use, either quickly or over a long-suffering period of time, realized this is really not the right environment for me to do what I do best. I would probably be better suited and thrive more creatively elsewhere. But what you're getting at is also not even so much professional wrestling comparison. It's also a question of, and this was something that was very common in the days before streaming and everything back when I was a kid. Oftentimes you would have sitcoms and dramas that could experience surprisingly long lives despite not being very good because they were strategically positioned after absolute juggernauts. So you sometimes had to ask yourself, is this show actually any good, or is it just getting these ratings because it's on right after Seinfeld?
So, a couple things, and then we should probably get into the movie. The central point of my argument was I feel like tonally, creatively, this thing does better in the 90s, but also the television and movie habits were a lot different prior to like the rise of streaming, because ultimately it changed the way people operate in society now when it comes to movies and television. And this is something that movies are struggling with now. And again, this came out in 2005, so we haven't even hit like the big glut of the problem where only the event films draw people to the movies.
The 2010s.
Yeah. But we're getting there in 2005. And so here's the thing. The comic book movies and comic book TV shows is kind of it's a funny nut to crack, because for every success that you point to, the Marvel movies that have made $1 billion, and it's very easy to say based on that, comic book movies make money. I'll name you 20 right off the bat that have failed.
You only 20?
In the past 10 years. And television shows are another thing. Krypton, 2 seasons, canceled. Agent Carter, now that may not have been intended to go anywhere past 2 seasons, but that got canceled. Marvel's Most Wanted never even got picked up. New Warriors never got picked up. I don't even think they think they finished the pilot, but that never saw the light of day. And that's just a couple of Marvel and DC ones. Look, there's some stuff that's been successful that people don't even think realize is a comic book show, like Preacher, which has been around forever, as is The Walking Dead. So it's a mixed bag. I think more of my point with this was that as you start getting into 2000, and by the time this comes out, with a lesser-known comic book character in a movie that deals with the occult and demons and whatnot and fallen angels, I don't know where you find the audience for that. I mean, this is a $100 million picture. This wasn't cheap. And, it's profitable. I mean, and you can get into this with the notes, but it made $230 million. But I found myself asking, who was this movie for? And the comic book audience is a fractured and funny thing. Because while there's a lot of us, there's also, as you have pointed out recently several times, there's a lot of people in the comic book community that take great pride in not liking things and are very concrete about things not matching up with the comic book and therefore being banned.
Literal hate boners.
Which is not an argument that that I necessarily follow. I'm the one that said, why can't Superman be anything you want it to be? But by the same token, and if you want to use a professional wrestling analogy, here's a good one.
Okay.
You've got, the audience of people who like professional wrestling in total is fairly large. But then when you start getting into personal tastes and picadillos and whatnot, it fractures really badly. And suddenly you end up with just a fraction of the audience watching your show. With comic book characters, you may have had a large portion of the world be interested in a Constantine movie, but once you started to deviate too much from the comic book, you lose probably half of them.
See, now here's where I will actually give your point some credence and say that the 90s might have been a better time. The 90s was a glorious era to get a movie made about an indie comic.
I was also thinking, isn't the 90s when we got The Craft?
It was.
So this is what I'm pointing. Like, the 90s, I feel... And I have to go back and look at the specifics, but I feel like the 90s was just chock full. I mean, look, the goth era is exploding, industrial music, witches, the occult. I don't remember what year the Blair Witch Project comes out, but it's somewhere in there.
That was 2000,
Right,
I
so
believe.
Right at the end.
Yes, 2000.
You've got...
Wait, was it 2000 or 1999? No, it was 99.
Okay,
yes.
Even better. You in music, you have sort of the grunge Seattle sound sort of turning into the new metal sort of Korn. Everyone's crying and sad and yelling.
It was the era. It was the era of alternative. It was,
right.
And I'm even going to amend that slightly. I'm not even going to necessarily say just indie comics, because I also have to remember the 90s was tragically when we got our first attempt at a Spawn movie.
I want to say it's also the 90s and the early 2000s. We got things like Tank Girl, where they were any cheap comic, any cheap movie they could make based on a comic book character.
Yep.
I think somewhere in there is Barbed Wire,
Judge Dredd.
The
Crow.
They threw a lot of crap at the screen, and there's this, and this goes directly to, I think, the problem with this film, which I'll get into with my prosecution, but. Mm-hmm. There is a huge hole between, I think, the developers of the film and what the studio notes were may have been. Essentially, what the comic book is and what it is to its fans versus what it was adapted to on screen. And that's not just with Constantine. That became a problem all over. That gap between the comic book and the film, I think, turned a lot of people away. And once the pattern was set of, basically, if there's a comic that I love and Hollywood gets a hold of it, they're going to fuck it 8 ways from Sunday, and I'm going to hate this thing. Mm-hmm. So, and here's what, and to that point, once you've driven away the comic book fans, who's left for a lot of these movies? What? Mm-hmm. And I'm not even asking this rhetorically. I'm asking it in earnest. Who's left to go see a movie about a chain smoking exorcist detective? Once you've lost the comic book fans,
best argument I can come up with is maybe you get lucky and, like with something like The Crow, and you make something that is actually so good, people just enjoy it on its own, and then they're kind of shocked later when you point out, wait, what the fuck? That was a comic?
Sure. You could create great art. There's just fewer examples of successful art than there is broad crap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, Sean. I think psychologically, this is what drives people from the theater is, look, for you and me, I think this is, for people like you and me, I think this is sometimes, it escapes us because we're so in the bubble of what's going on in television and movies and comic books and to a lesser extent music, is to the average person, they're not doing the research. They're not getting that involved. They're watching TV passively. They're watching Modern Family, or they're watching Family Matters. I know, huge gap in between those two shows. But, they're watching Different Strokes, even longer gap. But no, they're at home watching TGIF, or they're watching Friends, and they see a commercial for a movie, and you've only got 30 seconds to a minute to capture their interest. And I don't want to go through the long list of failed comic book movies, but when you think about, like, Cowboys and Aliens, what's the name of the Jonah Hex, Constantine, Tank Girl, just to name a few, how many Friends watchers are looking at trailers for any of those movies and going, I'm going to get up, spend upwards of $20 to $30 on a night out at the movies to go see those.
And that's a fair point, because the one problem with, as you branded them, the Friends watchers, is that as fans, those are the people that we hear complain about and deride these movies, and we just want to bluntly point out to them, well, these really weren't made for you.
Right.
These weren't made with you in mind. You were not the target audience. And by the same token, you also want to point this out to the studio too. And that's, don't shotgun your marketing. And this is another reason, and in turn, why I think this could be better marketed today, is the fact that marketing is often much more targeted. The era of the 90s you're talking about was the time of cable and over-the-air broadcast television. You're talking about FM radio, when the nerd communities on the internet were limited to news groups and message boards, if you want to really stretch it, and fanzines, stuff like that. Back then,
the days of the AOL email, where you didn't know quite what kind of porn you were going to get emailed.
Right. Back then, you just sort of had to kind of put your message out there and hope that in the midst of everybody else who was going to see it and not give a crispity, crunchity, peanut buttery fuck, that you also found the audience that it was intended for, and that your message was tailored just right. Nowadays, with a lot of the fragmentation of communities and the ability to, thanks to digital marketing, target things super specifically, and also studios and publishers getting so much smarter about how they choose to promote things, you can really zero in on the fans that you actually care about seeing something, and just kind of wait and see if you pick up anybody else.
Here's the my last argument to this. If you and I are debating how do you market Constantine and where would it be successful, and your whole thing is, I think now is Constantine's time, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I just disagree with the concept of a Constantine movie. I think a Constantine show now does fine. I mean, Jesse and I talked about that if they picked up the show and rebooted it, soft reboot, not get Matt Ryan back,
yes, absolutely,
and give him his own show on the CW or on DC Universe, I think it does fine.
I think you were right with one out of the two of those. And upon watching the show, I agreed wholeheartedly with what I remembered Comer and Mark, the film twit, saying way back when the show first came out. And that was that it didn't feel like the John Constantine he loved. Because it being NBC, they had to water him down and sanitize him.
Correct.
So much that you lost everything people dug about Hellblazer.
Right.
Now, the CW maybe could do right by him. And I say maybe because their track record with Riverdale is now working strongly in their favor.
Have you watched Legends of Tomorrow since he's been on it?
Yes.
Okay. See,
and
I think that's a much better representation of that character than when he had his own solo series.
Well, it was because one of the things that the Arrowverse did was it cemented kind of an existing bi/pansexual character,
right,
so that it wasn't quite so jarring. And that's another reason I think it works better now than in the 90s. Is, okay, you referenced Friends. I tried watching that recently. I watched maybe one middling episode way back when it was on, and I thought it was okay. But I decided to sit down and really give it a shot. And yes, this is maybe looking at it through modern goggles, but I was just kind of squirming a little bit at the fact that, in the very first episode, they imply that Ross's fiance leaving him was so much worse because she left him for another woman.
Right.
Like that fact somehow just amps up the villainy. We're kind of past that trope for the most part now. We're at a point where you watch Sarah Lance and it's like watching Captain Jack on Doctor Who. She will sleep with just about anything that moves.
She's been loyal to the one girl.
She has, but prior to that,
yeah, that's right.
Come on. I remember the episode. I remember the crossover with Flash's wedding, and the part where she runs up on Alex Danvers, and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, look, Alex is going to have some kind." Wait, Sarah, no, Sarah, don't, please don't. Oh, fuck, you're going to, aren't you?
Alex Danvers needed it badly.
Yes, but
she had a rough season up to that point.
But still, you have to admit it had become just almost a gag by that point when it came to Sarah.
Yeah,
and so that's what.
But gags are fun.
And so that's one reason why I think it works. Is number one, Supernatural has demonstrated that the CW can be a good home for a dark occult series. They've demonstrated that they are okay with embracing a character being openly queer, with having a main character who is openly queer. They have a great track record with DC. They have all of that working in their favor. I would think, though, that if you really wanted to go the full doing justice to Alan Moore's legacy route, a streaming service would be an even better home.
Yeah, no. Look, if you watch Doom Patrol, and you'll see just how good a DC Universe show can really be. I've been singing the praises of Doom Patrol since the summer, and that was the other. And so, yeah, if you wanted to do it there, where you have no restrictions, it's basically like doing an HBO show or Showtime.
Or AMC.
You can go balls to the walls and it'll be really successful. But I think you and I are saying the same thing differently. You're saying, if we did it now... See, like I said, I don't think a movie works anywhere. Maybe direct to Netflix, or whatever. Because I think... And I've mentioned this before on Damn You Hollywood. I feel like the executives at the movie studio have a lot of hands in the projects to just justify their existence and their salaries. But for some odd reason, television has become the Tiffany avenue for creative writing in terms of creating television shows and whatnot. Like the high-end thinking man's entertainment. That's the word I should have been using. Higher man's thinking man's entertainment ends up on television amidst a sea of other garbage. I get that, because someone's listening to this going, sir, crank yankers. No, I get it. Not everything on TV is awesome. But but I think, like, you can't get a Game of Thrones into a theater and have it make money, but you certainly, or The Wire or Breaking Bad, something like that, that's really higher order thinking and visually stunning, and it works on television, and I feel like the studios tend to just stay out of it. Like maybe there's studio involvement. I'm not sure. It doesn't feel like it though. When I read about the stories and I look at the comparisons between them. That said, the stuff that's working in the movies are your A-list characters most of the time. You have, like, Justice League was its own giant mess, and I don't even want to dig into that because we'll be here for 4 hours. So some of the, but like your Trinity characters, when the studios don't lose their minds or you don't have somebody who misses the entire point like Zack Snyder, your Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, that all works. Marvel, at this point, can't do any wrong. That stuff all works. But they're in the business of creating event films, which is mostly different than anything else that makes it to the movies, if it makes it to the movies at all.
Right.
The stuff that's second, third, and fourth tier dies. It just dies, Sean. Like, as somebody who studies this week to week to week and watches the film receipts, on Box Office Mojo, I mean, let's assume for the moment The Kitchen was any good. No one went to go see it. It was me and Jesse stole it. People are not leaving their house and risking being shot in a theater for second and third tier DC characters. They're just not. But I think you and I are saying the same thing, just differently. You're saying, like, hey, there's right now in this window of entertainment, there's a space for Constantine, and there is. That's actually factual. He's working on the CW, and I'm saying, okay, but he also would have worked in the 90s. The problem is we're talking about a film in 2005, which was the exact wrong time to try this.
Oh,
and
definitely.
In the wrong medium. And with that said, let's transition into notes.
All right. Well, Constantine has a surprisingly interesting pedigree. Let's start off with some utter absolute silliness. They actually had to change the title for a rather ridiculous reason. You see, they were afraid that if they called it Hellblazer, people were going to somehow confuse it with Clive Barker's Hellraiser series. And funny enough, this was not a new concern, because the comic series was originally going to be called Hellraiser. They changed it to Hellblazer so people wouldn't confuse it with Hellraiser. Before I get into a whole Oprah Uma thing going on here, bless you if you get that reference. Actually, you want to talk about a promising pedigree. People had been trying to make a John Constantine movie going as far back as 1997, and that effort was led by one of the eventual tips of the spear of the X-Men franchise, Lauren Shuler Donner. Paul Hunter was attached to direct another effort in 1999. Tarsem Singh was also slated to direct in 2001. Hang on, that name is familiar to me. I forgot to look it up earlier. What the fuck did he make? He's known professionally just as Tarsem. Oh, thank fuck he didn't get his hands on it. This was the guy that was responsible for The Cell. Moving on. You thought this was some nonsense. If you had a problem with Keanu Reeves as John Constantine, well, you can start thanking your lucky stars right about now. Because once upon a time, the plan was that Tarsum would direct Constantine in 2002 with Nicolas fucking Cage in the lead.
Oy.
What is it with people trying to cast this man in comic movies?
Tells you a lot about what they really think about comic movies. Right. In all honesty, comic book movies are the whores of movies. It's just, we have no respect for you, but we'll fuck you because we need to get a fuck on.
Sure. That was mercifully shit-canned when Sing dropped out entirely, and which actually set off a lawsuit between Tarsum and Warner Brothers. At that point was roughly when Keanu Reeves stepped in. This was actually the third attempt at the time to adapt a hit Alan Moore creation, because previously Hollywood had utterly flopped trying to make hits out of From Hell and Fame and oh god, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the movie that drove Sean Connery and its director into retirement. As a matter of fact, Moore noped right out of this so hard that he declined all credit for the movie.
Dude, Alan Moore is so funny to me because it's just like, hey, we're gonna do Watchmen, and then we're gonna do V for Vendetta, we're gonna do From Hell, and we're gonna do A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and by the end of it, Moore's like, I'm going into the woods to live deliberately. I've had it with Hollywood.
And
this poor bastard.
He wanted nothing to do with it, and in fact, his solution was just distribute my royalties among the other people who are heading this thing up.
And that's why we dedicated an entire month to that, man.
Just here, fucking take it. If you want to really get down to the DNA of it, it's kind of a slapdash love child of two Hellblazer arcs: Garth Ennis's Dangerous Habits, issues 41 through 46, and other elements, including the introduction of Papa Midnight, came from the original Sins trade paperback. They significantly altered John Constantine's physical appearance, which is why you don't get the tan trench coat. He doesn't look like Sting. Instead of being from Liverpool, Reeves is just
from parts unknown.
He's just Devil's Advocate Keanu Reeves. He's not yet John Wick. They move it from being it being implied that it's set in London to now being explicitly in Los Angeles. They gave him the psychic ability to see the half-breeds as they truly are. They kind of amended some other elements in the comic book, like the manner in which or how Lucifer comes about saving Constantine in the end, which, I'll get into that when we get down to kind of what I really think of this movie at the end, because while I do have my things about it that I at least didn't mind and at best grudgingly liked, yeah, I can see why Hellblazer fans had big problems with this. But I mean, really, as far as notes go, that's about it. As we always do, let's take a quick glance at how this thing actually did at the office. Did at the office. It went to the factory. It did a business. Part of the problem, it is entirely too fucking long. It's 121 minutes, which this was not the time when you made 120-minute superhero movies. Well, I guess it was. The second X-Men movie was on the long side, so okay, I'll rescind that statement.
You can do it in what makes that work though is you have a lot of characters and a lot going on, so you never spend too long with any one character.
Yeah.
This is almost every scene Keanu Reeves is in this, and he's not that interesting. But hey, that's my prosecution, so keep going.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't massively successful, but it did technically turn a profit. $100 million budget, $230.9 million total box office gross. It opened in just over 3,000 theaters on February 18th, 2005. Did $29.8 million in its opening weekend. Actually came in. Look at it one way, you could spin it as, hey, it came in second in the box office in its opening weekend. But then you also have to point out, yeah, it ranked second behind the second weekend for Hitch at the box office.
When Will Smith was still a thing.
By the time it left theaters on June 16th, 2005, it had made $76 million in the U.S. and Canada, $154.9 million internationally or everywhere else other than the U.S. and Canada. Critics basically savaged it. We're talking 46% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 224 critical reviews. Average review of 4 out of 10. If you look over on Metacritic, it doesn't fare much better. Average of 50 out of 100 based on 41 critics, indicating mixed or averaged reviews. Critics did have some positive things to say about it, that it was kind of hybrid theological noir, which shows that someone at some point actually kind of had the beginnings of the right idea. A few of them, for fuck knows what reason, actually liked Keanu Reeves. I will admit Tilda Swinton's performance as Gabriel was a highlight, so I have to give that credit. It's a great looking movie. I'll get more into that, but mostly. Yeah, this is one of those cases where a flop's a flop. It didn't come out and gain some kind of absurdly strong cult following when it hit home video. It came, it saw. Are we sure it came and saw? Because not everybody remembers it. I think give it a few more years and it'll probably go the way of the original Swamp Thing movie.
Put it between your copy of Supergirl and Swamp Thing. That's where it goes.
All right, Mark. Lay the plot out for us.
All right. Straight from the wiki. So this whole thing starts off with someone finding the Spear of Destiny. This was better done in Legends of Tomorrow, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We meet John Constantine, who's an occult detective, and he's seen doing an exorcism of a Filipino girl. That's the first time we see him. We also meet his apprentice, Chaz Kramer, who is played by Shia LaBeouf of Transformers fame. Take a breath on that one. We meet the half-angel, Gabriel, who is played by Tilda Swinton. We find out that Constantine has lung cancer, and he's on the slow march to death. He's trying to get into heaven, but it's not going to happen despite the fact that he does exorcisms because Gabriel believes he's doing them for all the wrong reasons, for selfish reasons. This begins John's journey into trying to find something that'll cure him, and so he goes to see Papa Midnight. But this is after he's been assaulted by yet another demon. Part of this is, during the exorcism, he noticed that a demon was trying to cross over into the world, which is against the rules in a wager between God and Lucifer. All right, moving on. So he tries to tell Dr. Midnight about the half-breeds trying to cross into the real world, but he doesn't believe him. And there's an exchange with another half-demon called Balthazar. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Then we meet Isabel Dodson, who commits suicide in a psychiatric hospital. We then meet Angela Dodson, who is her twin sister and who is a detective. She doesn't believe that her sister committed suicide. She thinks she would never do that. And she starts to investigate what might have happened to her sister. She hears her sister say Constantine's name. That's how they end up getting together. She goes looking for Constantine, at which point they are attacked by winged demons, who Constantine believes were targeting Angela, so he agrees to help her. Constantine goes to hell, literally, to see what happened with Angela. Sorry, to see what happened with Isabella. He explains to Angela that he can see the true nature of half-breeds. He explains a little bit about his origin, which is he committed suicide to escape his visions, and his soul was sent to hell, but he was revived by paramedics 2 minutes later for the sin of taking his own life. His soul is still condemned to go to hell once he dies. They examine Isabel's room in the hospital and find a clue pointing to a prophecy in the Satanic Bible that Lucifer's son Mammon will attempt to claim Earth as his own kingdom. To do so, Mammon requires both a powerful psychic, which will end up being Angela, and assistance from God, which is the Spear of Destiny. So now you know how that's all tied together. Angela tells Constantine that Isabel was a clairvoyant and a psychic, but she was committed by her parents. Angela had the same gift, but she suppressed it. So Constantine tries to awaken that ability by, of course, a near-death experience. He tries to drown her in a tub. She immediately finds a clue pinpointing Balthazar as an accomplice to the plot. Constantine interrogates Balthazar, who reveals that Mammon has the spear stained with the blood of Christ. The assistance, which is, as I said before, is the assistance from God. Angela, now the psychic in place of Isabel, is abducted by an invisible entity. With Papa Midnight's help, Constantine finds out how the spear emerged, and he finds where Angela is located. Constantine arms himself with an awesome-looking religious crossbow. Fantastic. And goes to the hospital, reluctantly bringing Shia LaBeouf along. The two fight their way through an army of half-demons to exorcise Angela. Chaz is supposedly killed by an invisible entity, which turns out to be Gabriel. Darn those angels. Resenting God's favoritism towards humans, Gabriel plans to unleash hell on Earth to weed out those deemed unworthy of God's love. Gabriel casts Constantine from the room and prepares to use the spear to cut Mammon free from Angela. Out of options, Constantine slits his wrists. He bleeds out. Lucifer arrives to personally collect his soul. Constantine tells Lucifer of Mammon's plan to usurp him. Confronted by Lucifer, Gabriel threatens to smite him in God's honor. However, the attack towards Lucifer comes up short, revealing to both Gabriel and Lucifer that Gabriel no longer has divine protection. Aha. Lucifer proceeds to burn Gabriel's wings, making Gabriel mortal, and Constantine punches Tilda Swinton right in the mush. It's the best part of the movie. Lucifer banishes Mammon back to hell and grants Constantine a wish out of gratitude. Constantine asks that Isabel be released to heaven. This is the dead sister, by the way. Lucifer complies, but then realizes too late that he cannot take Constantine to hell as a consequence. See, this is their interpretation of the trick Constantine pulled off in Dangerous Habits, by the way. This is what they came up with.
It's a stupid interpretation.
Agreed, defense attorney. By selflessly sacrificing himself, Constantine is granted entry into heaven. Infuriated, Lucifer heals Constantine's injuries, yet more interpretation of what happened in Dangerous Habits, and cures him of his lung cancer, hoping that he will eventually damn himself again. Angela and Constantine depart, now leaving human Gabriel. Sometime later, Constantine, now making an effort to quit smoking, entrusts the spear of Angela in a post-credit scene visiting Chaz's grave, where Chaz appears now as an angel. This movie sucks. All right, let me explain why I say that. Because you might say, well, that's awfully subjective. No, it objectively sucks, and here's why. Here's everything that's wrong with this movie. Constantine is not Superman. I don't know if you guys picked that up at all. He's not a symbol of all things good and holy in apple pie and Nancy Reagan. He's not a colorful, Christ figure standing in the clouds protecting us from all the bad things. He's not billionaire playboy cum vigilante Batman. Okay? He's not the goofy and affable, but hero to the core.
I'm 12.
I believe your girlfriend called us that the last time we did this.
Excuse me?
Do you remember we were doing dick jokes and she said you're both 12 years old?
Oh, okay. You know what? You said girlfriend, and for some reason, knowing that you two have become buddy-buddy, I thought you meant Alexis. I was going to say, okay, first the fuck all.
Right. Nope. Swiftly turning pages, moving on. So, Lady Jetbear. I'll have to call her by her nickname in order not to make that mistake again. So
on our show, it's fine. She's Carrie.
So yeah, Constantine is not the Flash, as I said, Barry Allen, the affable hero. He's not the stoic Hal Jordan. He's this limey, fuck all, Liverpool living, hard smoking, morally ambiguous, pansexual, living with witches and vampires guy. Okay. This guy, if you're rolling your D&D characters, has a charisma of 11 out of 10. He's amazing.
Would he be chaotic neutral or chaotic good?
Chaotic
by that
good.
standard.
Chaotic good.
That's kind of the way I was leaning, but I could almost see an argument for chaotic neutral.
Well, no, he's driven to do the good. He's driven, if not by guilt, then just by conscience to do the good thing.
Yeah, he's just going to do it his way.
Yeah. Occasionally get a girl sent to hell. It happens. Who amongst us hasn't condemned a small child to hell? Anyway, so that's Constantine, and Matt Ryan, does a really great job of portraying that when given the opportunity, especially on Legends. Keanu Reeves, who was cast as Neo in The Matrix, and for some odd reason, his next 12 pictures couldn't get away from this character. Hollywood sucks.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have a successful character, and sometimes that's all people. This is why other actors take on weird pictures that may or may not do well, but at least they can stretch as an actor. They can break the perception of what they are, so that you don't keep getting the same roles over and over and over again. And I think that's part of the problem with Constantine, is people looked at this and went, I've already seen The Matrix. Why do I need to see this again? Only this is The Matrix with vampires and shit. That's what this looks like. So Keanu Reeves, who generally speaking has a fair bit of charisma himself, that's what makes Neo work.
Oh, certainly.
But in this movie, in his channeling of Neo, utterly loses the characterization that made Constantine. Look, you're not going to see Constantine punch a building into outer space. You're not going to see him, as a ninja hiding in the shadows, taking out a gang of penguins hoodlums. You are going to see him smoke an entire case of cigarettes while summoning demons for fuck all. And that's what gets lost in this movie. They had a picture of what was working in the movies and with Keanu Reeves, and we're like, let's take that framework and put it on top of Constantine. And they're like, well, it doesn't really fit. There's circles where there's squares should be, and there's triangles, and they're like, well, just fucking hammer it, okay? Just hammer the framework on to this character and this book, and it'll be fine, nobody will notice. But that's the problem, okay? In all seriousness, this is a drab-looking... The color palette on this thing might as well have been in black and white. It's so drab. It's so colorless, except for when he goes to hell, which is also all in orange. But at least there was color. Keanu Reeves, in trying to sort of... I kept thinking about Eddie Izzard as I was watching his performance, because he talks about how if any movie in England does any bit of business... they'll bring it to America and utterly Americanize it, and I'm not going to go through the whole joke. It's funny. Go listen to it. But he talks about like he does an impression of what he thinks an American sounds like doing a British character, and it's hysterical. And that's what's happening in this picture, except that it sucks. Because I'm all for interpretations of a character, and I'm not necessarily tied to, well, he had to be from England. But then give me more charisma. Give me more moral ambiguity. Give me dialogue readings above a whisper, for God's sake.
Oh, God, the damn sound. Okay, I'm going to jump in here and concede something. I'm going to take off the defense attorney hat for a moment. And I am just going to say, for fuck's sake, I would have been slightly more tolerant of this movie if not for the fact that the audio mixing is so unforgivably, sadistically awful.
Yeah.
It just you can't understand shit. You remember the Saturday Night Live sketch where they on Weekend Update where they had one guy playing Tom Petty and one guy playing Bob Dylan, and the joke was that you just could was in fact I think at one point I forget which one it was. I believe it was during the Dennis Miller days, and they had one of them on there trying to read something. Yeah, it was Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan was trying to give commentary on something, and Des just said, Bob, hang on. We can't understand a word you're saying. Can we get another Wilbury in here? And they bring in somebody playing Tom Petty, and it just goes back and forth between their respective indecipherable cadences until they just break out into a chorus of Free Fallin'. That's what it's like to watch this movie if you don't have the volume turned up to levels that would be unacceptable to the deaf.
So there's that. I won't. All right, so we'll leave that alone because we both agree. So, moving on. So I've often said sometimes, well, the star may be lacking. Well, at least he's got a good supporting cast. The ghost of Rachel Weisz didn't really add anything to this. Jesus Christ. And she's not a bad actress. I'm sure if I pull up her IMDb, she's been in a fair number of pictures that weren't hot garbage. Good for Rachel Weisz. In this one, it's as if, she was like, should I read this with some inflection, with some emotion? And the director's like, could you read it as if you were dead? Jesus Christ. So you have no charisma and an utter misunderstanding of a character in Keanu Reeves. You've got... I can't even call it like a competent performance from Rachel Weisz. It seems like she showed up, didn't understand what she was doing, and just literally was like, what am I doing in this scene? Like, run that way. And she would run that way. It reminded me of Ewan McGregor talking about working for Lucas on The Phantom Menace, where he was like, I don't understand how film works anymore. There's no sets. I'm just standing in front of a green screen interacting with nothing. This isn't acting. And I feel like that's what happened to poor Rachel Weisz, where she's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And the first-time director's like, talk to Keanu. Act. So there's that problem. Your two main leads in this suck on ice. They don't give a gripping performance, which this movie sorely needs. This movie is convoluted plot-wise, and here's the thing, and this happens a lot with sci-fi and fantasy, where you do a fair amount of world building. George Lucas, again, I hate to keep going back to him, but he's really good about, like, I'm going to introduce 9 billion things that nobody understands or just inventions from my own mind. Try to keep up. And you have to, like, have Cliff Notes and a legal pad with you in order to understand what's happening half of the time, unless you have a competent writer to take all of that and synthesize it into a story that makes fucking sense. See The Dark Crystal. So, not that I want to get back on that again, but my point is that there's people who can do that and do it well. This, like, just when you think you understand how the Bible and how the occult works, this movie just takes it in directions, and you're like, okay, well, I'm willing to go with you, but this is like following a guy into the jungle, and he keeps, like, hitting the bushes, and the bushes come back and hit you in the face constantly. After a while, I'm not enjoying this ride anymore. I don't understand what's happening, and my face hurts. So that's the problem with the plot. So it looks drab, poor performances, the plot is utterly convoluted. The action sequences. When you finally get to one, they're not bad. But it's it's weird that the explosions guy is the one that's going to make this argument, but it's just Keanu Reeves interacting with CGI, it looks like. Like, I'm not really... Like, when I watch some of the Marvel movies, and they're clearly using CGI, but you're lost in the performances, and you're lost in the story, and in this world that they've created, and the CGI actually doesn't look half bad. Like, for example, say what you will about Thor Ragnarok, there are some great uses of CGI in the movie that are bright and colorful, and there's a lot happening. And if you're not Robert Winfrey or Pat Mullen, you can actually enjoy yourself. You can get lost in the fantasy. Here, you have a lame duck character interacting with garbage CGI in action sequences that are not particularly interesting. And I think that it suffers from the convoluted plot. So I think, like, in other words, there might have been halfway decent action scenes in this movie if I wasn't already bored and annoyed by everything I had seen leading up to it. So, like, you take, like, a Hobbs and Shaw, where you have characters with a lot of charisma, and they're fun, and there's a lot of, taking the piss out of each other, which is then peppered with these bombastic action scenes. And so even if some of the action scenes, as we talked about on that edition of Damn You Hollywood, are over the top and silly and obviously CGI'd, you're okay because at least you went along for a nice journey to get there. Whereas this movie takes you on a crap journey to the point where when you get there and you go, I'm not impressed, I don't like it. There's, and the other side of that is you might go on a crap journey, but then you get to this really awesome action scene, something that we've talked about on this show, where, well, everything else about this movie is hot garbage. Boy, those action scenes awesome. Like, I completely forget I'm watching a garbage movie. But there's none of that here. It's like this movie just fails on every level. I mean, am I being too harsh? Is there anything I liked about this? Yeah, Tilda Swinton's awesome. Congratulations. Mm-hmm. You have one competent actor who can act her way out of a paper, act her way out of any garbage situation. And yes, her interactions with Keanu Reeves are kind of fun, especially at the end when she gets her comeuppance and he punches her in the face. That's funny, as I said before. But the guy playing Papa Midnight, who was also...
Jaimin Hansu?
Yeah, who was also... he was the wizard in Shazam. He's not a bad actor. He's Korat, the Pursuer. He's really, really good, and he's got a lot of charm and personality to him, too. And the Papa Midnight character really needs somebody who just sort of just eats the scenery and really embraces the role. And either they gave him nothing or he just kind of showed up for the check. But that was a wasted performance because I really like the Papa Midnight character. If for no other reason than anytime I think of somebody dealing in voodoo, I think of Body Count song Voodoo, which always makes me laugh. Listen to it, you'll know what I'm talking about. She tried to teach me about the voodoo, motherfucker, voodoo. Anyway, so I'll leave it at that. The movie was in focus. I didn't see any boom mics. Though even the sound mixing, as Sean put, was absolutely terrible. This needed work before they went to filming it. This needed a different actor. Keanu Reeves was not right for this part. This needed a second or third rewrite on the plot. And this probably didn't need to be made in 2005. You're a witness.
Okay, so allow me to lead off with this. Look, this could have been a whole lot worse.
What are you doing here, Mark?
I mean, on the bright side, I actually discovered, totally by accident, and I have to think this was entirely unintentional, a possible way this movie could have worked. So there was actually a good idea there that was unfortunately just never followed up on. And it goes like this. I was watching it, and for a while I was noticing that everybody was just talking about what a shifty con man John Constantine was, as opposed to actually maybe letting an actor portray this? Well, I got to thinking, what if you maybe turned this into an angle at some point where it was established that, you know, he maybe did this as part of a series, like a television series, and you established that this was John Constantine at the end of his life, all of a sudden becoming a desperate man as he strives and scrambles for any possible way to save his soul while he's running out of options. In that case, a movie and maybe even a portrayal like this might have worked, because it's John Constantine after having the piss and vinegar sucked out of him. Oh, God, that actually sounds like a fetish porn. The great John Constantine has been brought to his knees, and these ethereal beings, these deities, these immortal demons and angels that he's been pulling a fast one on for years, are finally getting smug about the fact that he's getting his comeuppance, and they are loving it. Okay, in that case, it works, because you'll have established a little bit more, at least a little bit more, of the John Constantine that Hellblazer fans know and love. And if you insist on making John Constantine American, which, you know, I believe you could do it. I don't believe there's necessarily anything overtly wrong with that. The right way to do it would have been to just take whatever chains you swaddled Keanu Reeves in for this movie and just strip them off. Let him exude that natural charisma. Let him be devil's advocate Keanu Reeves in absolute fucking full. And you actually have a decent, passable, maybe even downright good Americanized John Constantine. That can work. Keanu Reeves could have absolutely pulled that off. But the thing is, John Constantine, as fans came to know and love him, was a charismatic, shifty, rough around the edges hedonist. Keanu just plays him as bored.
Yep.
Just nothing else really established about him. He's cynical, but he's just bored and pissy. There's no reason to want to see this man redeem himself or succeed at fucking anything. He is just simply the most drab, angry man alive. You know, if Taz, the human suplex machine, were an exorcist, he would be Keanu Reeves as John Constantine. Which, you know, actually getting a good performance out of Keanu, you know who else would have actually been a decent actor to portray Constantine? Tim Roth.
Yeah, that would have worked really well.
You know, he's got the look, he's got the natural accent, he's got the charm. I mean, he would have been the absolute total package. He failing somehow just dumping Matt Ryan into a TARDIS and shipping him off to this movie's filming so that he can replace Keanu Reeves. That would have been my pick. Is just find Tim Roth and back a Brinks truck up to his fucking house. Although, actually, you know what? I don't think you would have had to pay him that much. I mean, he's not an A-lister himself. He's more one of those people that just kind of looks for mostly something he can just sink his teeth into.
I was going to say, once again, he's currently doing the same character on the CW. He's fine. He's happy you called.
Well, I was talking about Tim Roth, not Matt Ryan. But.
Oh, okay.
Although again, I liked Matt Ryan. What I think here when we talk about all three is we're talking about 3 solid performers who just were not given all that much to work with. Or, failing that, in Keanu's case, maybe one who just didn't quite get the right reading of the character. I don't know. He's a fairly sharp guy. I would have to imagine that at some point he sat down with a few trade volumes of Hellblazer and decided to educate himself. I just don't know if they were the right issues or if he maybe didn't discuss them with anybody first so that they could actually get the character right. But they're not untalented people. They are neither Matt Ryan nor Keanu Reeves. But the thing is, the script is also not written with much material that would give them an opportunity to really bring that vision of Constantine out. You know, this is the guy that will double-cross God and the devil at once and just walk away smirking. I never got that from this version of the character. But I'm getting off track, and I'm making the prosecution's job easier than it really is.
You're doing a damn great job. I appreciate it.
What I can say about this is this would have worked better as a standalone movie that had been inspired by Constantine. Because that way you don't have to look at it and entirely say, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Yeah, that way you can just sort of process it on its own merit. It's a bit like how if you watch about the first half of Rob Zombie's Halloween, you're left kind of dumbstruck because for a while there you forget that this is the sodomization of a seminal horror franchise, and you actually start to think, this actually isn't a half bad slasher movie. Are we sure Rob Zombie made this? That's what you end up with, because you have a fairly interesting plot here. But maybe that's because I actually like a little bit of theological horror. I think it's interesting to take something like that and turn it on its head, even if some stuff starts to get redundant and more than a little bit confusing. You got to remember, I'm a huge Hellboy fan too. And Hellboy at its best is rife with that kind of shit. So I liked the tone of it. As far as the visual effects go, I loved the look of the CGI. I rather enjoyed the scene when Balthazar has half of his human suit melted off, and we're left with a combination of Gavin Rossdale and Balthazar's true form. I even kind of like the way that Keanu plays that a little bit. It's one of the more John Constantine moments of the entire movie. The bit where he's snarking on having this brilliant plot of, oh, you're going to die, so I'm going to give you the last rites, and you're going to be the only demon in heaven. Have fun with that. That's one of the few moments where he actually sounds just a smidge like John Constantine. And frankly, I think that I'm going to come around and say this. I think that not playing up his bisexuality was a rather cowardly move, because that's also something that you can play up as to just kind of what a man whore he's capable of being, but what a very successful man whore. Because it is kind of part of his character. He kind of has a penchant for taking someone from either sex that happens to find him repulsive and somehow finding his way into their pants. He's like a more lecherous Han Solo. You know, he's a trickster, and in this he's just not. In fact, you kind of get the impression that it's, you know, him kind of leaning on his friends Hennessy and Beeman to kind of do a lot of the thinking for him. So there's that. Tilda Swinton kind of sometimes gets typecast into these roles as the wise, mystical or semi-mystical being. But you know what? You also got to admit she plays it pretty well. I don't dare call anyone as talented as her a one-trick pony, but it's definitely something that's just another day at the office for her. And she's perfectly effective. I rather liked the androgynous take on Gabriel every bit as much as I surprisingly dug Balthazar being this kind of swarthy, slimy schemer. I just think that was a good characterization, maybe perhaps not best suited to someone with as little acting experience as Gavin Rossdale. I mean, I don't remember if he maybe got a Bush song or two onto the soundtrack, but anyway. But no, it's well shot for a kind of urban gothic thriller that it is. I think it looks good, but that also again comes back to it's not a good Hellblazer movie, but it had the potential for good urban fantasy based on its aesthetics. The sound mixing, we already talked about that. I won't belabor it. Shitty Labubu manages to not be insufferable.
Says you.
No, not entirely insufferable. I mean, we're comparing this on a sliding scale here.
Okay, it's not Transformers 2. You're right.
I concede that point. Exactly. It's on a curve. It's not Transformers. It's not Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I was going to say, I'm only conceding it's not Transformers 2. And okay, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Sure.
It's not even Desperate Screaming Meme Lord Shitty LaBeef. He's tolerable. He's in the movie just enough. I'm still not given a reason to give a shit about him. But, you know, at least he's not in there a great deal. So I mean that may be the most timely disappearing act a character has ever pulled off. It's basically addition by subtraction. I thought there was real potential for the Papa Midnight character. Again, I just would have liked for him to have been much more charismatic and at times forceful, because you know characters like that can be actually really, really fun. I would point to the Rodan character in Bayonetta, or both Bayonetta games. Fallen Angel basically runs a bar somewhere between Inferno and Paradiso. It's kind of sort of neutral ground, but he's a wisecracker. He's got kind of a hard edge about him. He's a little bit gruff. He's a badass. But again, I also chalk that up to Midnight being in the movie so damn little. Like I said, there's trace DNA of a good idea here. It just wasn't executed by the right people. So this movie is not entirely unredeemable. It's one of those where I think that it could have been saved by having fans on like a Ryan Reynolds Deadpool level. The two Deadpool movies were as damn good as they were, in part because Ryan Reynolds has a 100% genuine, downright infectious love for the character. You can feel it in every bit of the performance, every little touch to the movie. He digs this shit. This is not Martin Scorsese talking shit on comic movies out of one side of his mouth, and then the instant he's getting fuck you Warner Brothers money to make a Joker movie, all of a sudden it's, oh no, I just hate Marvel.
In his defense, anybody who really enjoys the art of making film hates Marvel.
Yeah, it's not the douche drippings of Todd Phillips, the little cunt bucket who made the same comedy 3 times and somehow nobody managed to notice, deciding that a comic book movie is just a convenient place for him to piss and moan about the fact that nobody likes him punching down anymore. Movies like Deadpool and like the first couple Spider-Man movies are movies made by people who genuinely dig these characters and this world, and they just want to bring it to life. Not their own necessarily weird artsy-fartsy vision of it, but just everything they love about it. Everything that jumped right off the page at them. I feel like that's what we get with the way Matt Ryan portrays Constantine basically on a combination of Legends and what was the movie? Justice League Dark. Easy to forget. He was the voice of Constantine in Justice League Dark too. You get the sense that he loves this fucking character and just wants to do it right. That was never an impression I got with this. I never got the impression these were big Hellblazer fans. Because if it had been, what you would have had, what's the name of the movie?
Catwoman.
No. Brandon Routh was in it. It was also kind of a dark, supernatural, comic-based action comedy. Dylan Dog. You could have done kind of almost a tone like that, or something like Supernatural, and you'd have had a great movie with the material you were working with here. You had the right arcs, you had the right characters, you had the very beginnings of good ideas. You just didn't have them in the right hands. You know? But again, it's all speculation, and yes, I realize I can't necessarily give this a 100% glowing review, although I will say I did also really dig Peter Stormare's Satan. I thought he was just apparently having a grand old time with the few minutes that he got. But all in all, I don't think it's unredeemable, or that there's necessarily stuff that this movie shouldn't get credit for. I just think that it kind of deserved a better chance than what it ultimately got.
I really hated Shia LaBeouf in this, and I'm not, and I know like the in thing to do is bark about how bad Shia LaBeouf is. He didn't do himself any favors in those Transformer movies, but then again, he was also working for a guy whose aesthetic is tits. So, I mean, you know, tits and sweaty cars, or sweaty tits and hot cars, whatever you like. So, I mean, it's not all his fault.
Yes, but give Michael Bay credit. They were often very well lit tits.
Yeah, no. He knows how to. Look, that man knows how to do one thing. He knows how to shoot tits and cars. There's nobody better in Hollywood. If I ever, when I finish my screenplay called Tits and Cars, I want Michael Bay to direct it. That said, you watch the TV show and you read the comic, and again, I'm not so concrete as to say you have to do 100% interpretation of the character, 100% faithful to the character. But I mean, at least get the relationship right. Mm-hmm. There was no point in having Chaz in the movie. They might as well have just invented a character out of whole cloth, because that was not Chaz. That was Chaz in name only. And so even if I divorce myself for what my preconceptions of Chaz were, and accept the fact that this is an entirely different take on the character, hearing Shia LaBeouf yell John 900 times throughout this picture was not fun for me. That's not a character I really want to see in this. Basically the American version of fucking Short Round. Even Short Round, was less annoying.
Hold on to your potatoes.
You did it, lady. God.
Lady only here because she humping director.
I want to be the apprentice of an exorcist, witch doctor, occult detective, except that everything scares the fuck out of me. I'm frightened sitting here in this cab. Alrighty. I feel like that was probably a studio note. They were like, listen, we can't make him too competent. We need to have a goof as it. It's like the Rob Schneider character in Judge Dredd. Ugh.
Oh, Rob Schneider. This was truly your golden age.
You gone and did it. Anyway, so that, I think, wraps up our coverage here of Constantine.
Yep.
I waited a whole year to do this. I dedicated a week to it. I'm prepared now to put it back in the box and not deal with this for a while.
For a while, what is there? Another Constantine movie in the works?
I mean, look. Now I want to read Original Sin at some point, and we do a year's worth of comic book stuff. Eventually, we might come across this again. My God, there were like 500 people on the source material to talk about Dangerous Abbots. Apparently, he's quite popular in those who follow us.
Well, and look, I'm not certain other people who will pretend to be big fans of something and then talk out of their ass. I will come right out front and admit I've read a little bit of Hellblazer. Mm-hmm. Not a lot, but from what I finally read after kind of mostly from hearing Cole's gripes about the TV show, I agree with the take that this was emphatically the wrong way to go about this. Entirely wrong. Wrong.
I'll be curious next year. I'm dedicating an entire week to Lucifer. Never watched the show. Only recently realized it was based on a comic book. So I figure with the show having its last season on Netflix and relatively soon, I figure it's probably as good a time as any to give it the old college try and see how it goes. So that doesn't really involve on trial. It just involves the comic book and the show. But next week, our Halloween show, as it were, which it won't be on Halloween, it'll be on the 24th of October, we're going to do, here's one I really like. This one I'm very excited for.
Well, look, I mean, disclaimer, we're just not recording it on Halloween. There's no reason you can't hold it until Spoopy Day.
It's true. From dusk till dawn.
Yes.
So, I think I have it in my notes here, who's doing what, but let's make a final decision here. Wu-Tang. All right. Full field calendar. All right. In my notes, there is A, an apple. B, a badger. God damn it. You ever play that?
I love From Dusk Till Dawn so much.
You ever play the game, the car game in my grandmother's box?
I've played similar games, maybe not that exact one. It's a kind of theme that has a lot of different ways you can kind of frame it.
Yeah.
Like I'm coming to the picnic and I'm bringing
A in Apple.
Yeah.
Got it. I have to reload my calendar here. All right. Take two.
Pick two?
Take two.
Take two. Okay.
Second attempt. All right.
I thought you said pick two. I was going to say,
My notes.
like a hot dog and a taquito.
My hot dog. God damn it, Sean. My my notes say you're prosecuting and I'm defending.
I have to prosecute from dusk till dawn. Oh my god. I'll try. I will do my heckin' best.
All right, that's that. We may be doing boxing coverage tomorrow. We may not. Everybody I know is a punk-ass sissy boy, and nobody will watch the Bare Knuckle Show with me this Saturday, so I won't be covering it. I'll just be watching in tears as nobody will watch with me. But God damn it, I'll be watching Bigfoot Silva Bare Knuckle fight Gabriel Gonzaga, and I will be gloriously pantsless.
Are you fucking serious?
I am fucking serious.
Dude, yeah, pantsless is going to be a necessity for you in that case. even I got to admit, if I could afford to order that event, even I would kind of be sitting up in my seat at that one.
Well, I couldn't get the snob to watch, or either snobs to watch, so...
Which snobs are we talking about?
Winfrey and Mullen.
That was my guess.
I don't want to watch this. It's just not good fights. Snobs. Next week, we got Fear Itself on source material, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. Sean and I will be doing Insatiable Season 2 in the afternoon, and then myself and Jesse Starcher will be reviewing Lacuna Coil, Black Anima in the evening, and then the aforementioned From Dusk Till Dawn. And then finally, we've got Blackest Night, Zombieland 2, and instead of a Metal Hammer of Doom, we're instead going to do a TV party for the Mayhem movie, Lords of Chaos. And that wraps it up for the month of October. All right.
Lords of Chaos.
Yes.
What is that one? I feel like I might have seen that.
It's currently on Hulu. It's the biopic about the band Mayhem back when they were doing the murdering.
Oh, never mind. Not what I was thinking of. I don't know what I was thinking of, but it sounds similar to a Canadian horror movie.
No, it's not that.
Okay, never mind then.
But it does star what's-his-face, the Home Alone kid's brother.
Kieran Culkin?
Yeah, I believe so. All right, tell everybody about your stream, your long stream, your glistening stream.
Just a moment while I take a breath after that. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because this is actually one of the few times when I'm going to be streaming almost immediately after we get done recording. It's about 8 p.m. right now, 8 p.m. Central Time, that is. And I am going to be over on twitch.tv/Comer Codex for about 3 or 4 hours playing some competitive Overwatch, as I usually do on Thursdays. I'm actually streaming 6 days a week right now. Friday and Saturday night I reserve for story-based games, which right now is Alien Isolation. And Monday is Murder Monday, which is where I will usually play a grab bag of either Killer Games and Dead by Daylight, coming soon, Mortal Kombat 11, or every now and then I might just dive into whatever horror game I'm playing. A good chance that right now, since we're a little ways from the next DBD patch, and I have yet to buy the full game of Mortal Kombat 11, we're probably just going to play some more Isolation. We're about coming up on halfway through it, so I think we should only need about maybe, I don't know, I'd like to finish it in about 3 more streams. Get it done so that on Halloween I can start playing The Last of Us. But again, that's twitch.tv/Comer Codex. It's a very chill stream, mostly focused on competitive gaming, a little bit of story-based. But if you want to find out what I'm going to be playing exactly and when, follow me on Twitter @Comer Codex. You will also get ample ramblings about music, movies, TV, hockey. You have a few more months until the fixation on Overwatch League starts up again.
Sean will also be developing his own legal defense for terrible wrestling gimmicks. His first client, Shorty Gable.
Really, not all that hard.
Ugh, God.
No. That is not that difficult. I will admit, yeah, it's not ideal. And if the rumors are to be believed, he's being saddled with this in part because Vince McMahon actually thinks he's ridiculously talented and just kind of wants to have fun with him. But here's the thing, and it may be a bit of a cop-out, but you have to give him credit. The man is taking it and running with it.
All the credit. None of my gripes have been about Chad Gable and his inability to be a performer or an athlete.
It's stupid, but I don't think this is going to be the gimmick he's going to be stuck with forever and ever and all the evers. It's something that he can kind of sink his teeth into for right now, and as I always point out, and it's a frequently used defense because there's so little to necessarily argue about it. Matt Bourne, Mike Rotunda, and Mark Calloway were respectively handed Wrestling Clown, Wrestling Tax Accountant, and Wrestling Zombie.
There's a whole podcast in why I disagree with that analogy. But we're out of time. We'll see you next time on Monday Nitro.
We're out of time! Had fucking Jerry Seinfeld screaming sound. And what is the deal with airline food? Sting is here!
I'm poking you, but yeah. Anything else?
No, I got it. Please tune into the stream. We're coming up on the first of our subscriber reward goals.
All right, very good. Well, tune in next week for our prosecution and defense of Quentin Tarantino and what's his face, Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn. In the meantime, in between time, be well, be safe, and behave.